It is one of my favorite games of the season as the Philadelphia Flyers and the St. Louis Blues face off tonight.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And a happy Thursday, October 31st, and welcome back to Locked On Blues. I am your host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about our St. Louis Blues. On today's episode, I will be joining Russ Cohen and Rachel, who are the hosts of Locked On Flyers, as we discuss this matchup for tonight's spooky contest. And it is spooky because of the Blues' 8-1 loss to Ottawa, so obviously things are not going great. However, I do want to let you know that you can get started with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with a $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, without any further ado, let's go talk to Russ and Rachel about this contest tonight.
This is our favorite time of the year because the Flyers are facing the St. Louis Blues, and we get to talk to Haley Taylor Simon, who not only covers the Philadelphia Flyers, but is also the host of Locked On Blues. So she knows both teams really well, and we get to have a good time previewing the matchup. How's it going, Haley?
It is going quite well. I actually just got back from the Blues' optional practice today, so was at the rink for the past couple hours.
Yeah, and then you go into 80-degree weather. Perfect.
Yeah, it feels like summer all over again with rookie camp, so nothing new.
I know. It does not feel like Halloween out there,
No.
but it is for today's game. Haley, from the Flyer side of things, like after that Bruins game, do you think the Flyers defense is back on track, or do we need more games to decide that?
Definitely more games. I like what we saw out of Emil Andre. I thought he played an excellent game. However, I think right now it's too early in the season to kind of get a feel for the defense. I know that there's been some players that have been struggling, as in Zamula, maybe even Ristolainen a little bit. But in terms of like Drysdale, I'm not seeing what I want to see out of him yet either. And I think that with Cam York being injured and being out for a couple weeks, there's not a real feel for this defense because, again, who knows how long Emil Andre is going to stay up with the Flyers.
That's fair. So talking about Sam Ersson, he had a nice shutout against the Bruins, but in 70 NHL games, he's still at an .892 save percentage. Even on a bad year, NHL save percentage average is .908, .910 on a bad year. Is he ever going to get over 90% or 900? Because I think that's a big mark to get if you're going to expect to be a number one goalie.
And that's a good question, and I don't know. And it's not because I don't think Ersson isn't capable, but when you don't have a defense that's doing its proper job, it's going to make the best goalies look bad. I mean, even looking at the St. Louis Blues, you look at Jordan Binnington. I think he's only recorded one win this entire season, and that's just due to the fact that the defense isn't playing up to par when he's in net. So putting this all together for Sam Ersson, I think that the numbers don't equate to what he's actually doing in net. And last night's game, I mean, he had some incredible saves in that first period. And I think that if anyone's doubting his abilities, they need to go back and rewatch some of those saves because it's truly remarkable.
Yeah, I think so. It is a really strange time in Flyers goalie land, and I feel like we say that a lot because of the Flyers goalie history. But with Alexei Kolosov getting a game in net, we're not really sure when the next time Fedotov is going to be in the lineup. Like, what is your take, and what do you think they should do versus what they will do?
I think that Fedotov may not be an NHL caliber type of goalie, and it sucks, but they did give him a contract with a lot of money. So I wouldn't say, put him on waivers or do anything crazy like that yet. I would say maybe take some time, help him develop a little bit more. I know he's 27, and I know that's older when it comes to, developing a goalie. However,
he's still a rookie, though.
He is. And he played excellent in the KHL. And I think that's something that people forget, that he was one of the best out there. So they should do that, but they shouldn't put him on the ice until he feels confident. So keep Kolosov in net as backing up Ersson and see how he does. But again, he's only played one game and you can't get a feel for how he is. It's an unfortunate situation, but I feel like the Flyers need to just remember that money that they spend on players, they can't just magically get rid of.
No, that's true. So one of the things that has kind of gotten me this year is just the handling of Noah Cates. Doesn't
Yep.
seem like the coaching staff knows what to do with him because they have expectations of scoring that are just never going to be there. Like he has never been a big scorer anywhere. At college, he was a good scorer, but he's never going to be a big scorer. But he is one of the best defensive forwards. He is really good on faceoffs. And yet last game, they start him on fourth line left wing. And then, of course, by middle of the game, he's taken a lot of he's taken faceoffs again. So what do you make of this with he and the coaching staff?
I think it's weird, to be honest with you. Last year, Cates was like the golden boy. We saw him all the time playing. And now, I mean, the fact that they healthy scratched him as many times as they did in the beginning, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think he did anything wrong. I think that he had a good training camp. He looked
Mhm.
fine. And, Russ and Rachel, I know you both were there. And it's like none of us
No.
said at any point, oh, Noah Cates looks off. He doesn't look
No.
good. So maybe there's something internally going on, maybe with him and Tortorella. I'm not speculating. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense when he is more valuable on the ice than some of these other players that they start over him.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that kind of leads into the bigger picture here of John Tortorella and his lineup choices and decision making, which, Noah Cates is just an example of why some of it I think just feels off this year, that decisions are not being made in terms of who makes the most sense on a particular day and what combinations together. And I don't know if you've been feeling that from your end too.
Yeah, it's been weird. Like, um, the one game they had Sean Couturier on the fourth line as like a winger. It was something weird like that. And I think Tortorella is changing them up because he's trying to find that magic solution. However, when you've only played a handful of games, you need to have some consistency for the players to at least gain some chemistry. And that's why training camp, when, folks saw Michkov and Morgan Frost together at that point in time, they looked like they had good chemistry. And then you put Michkov with Tippett and you're moving him all around. It just didn't make sense putting him with Paling. That was stupid. So I feel like the first line right now with Couturier, Michkov, Konechny, that's fine, honestly. And I would keep that. But they need to give these guys consistency. And I feel like that's going to be the number one downfall of the Philadelphia Flyers is trying to fix all these problems immediately and instead of letting things play out.
No, that's fair. So during the offseason when Eric Johnson was signed, he was sold as he's an extra guy. Well, he'll be the eighth defenseman. He's just good in the room. And lo and behold, he's playing a lot because John likes to play his veterans. The weird thing is, again, I have to question the coaching staff on this. Presumably, he's there to play defense, yet he's 52.7% on offensive zone starts. So it's like he's not even there more defensively than offensively. So that makes my head explode because I really don't know what his role is.
His role is so confusing to me too, Russ. I mean, I hear him speak, after the games and he's like, oh, well, we deserve the booze. We weren't playing good enough. And I'm like, okay, that's like what a veteran leader would say.
Right.
But yet I'm thinking to myself, he's also saying at the same time, I could do more to help out Jamie, as in Jamie Drysdale. And I'm like, wait, is he a veteran leader or are they expecting him to coach these young guys? Like, I don't know what his role is, but yet, as you did mention about, being in the offensive zone, it seems like they're putting a lot on him more so than they should. And that's where it's kind of like we had those veteran players where, I could go back and name a whole bunch, but veteran players know what their role is. It's to just be a leader in the locker room. It's to be a leader on the ice. Him saying that after that presser took me by surprise because I'm like, oh, wow. There is a lot of pressure on Eric Johnson this season, more so than any of us. Even with the Michkov pressure of, I'm going to help him out.
Yeah.
I don't know what they expect from him at this point.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of confusion there in terms of what they want out of him. And I think, the Cam York injury has thrown another wrench into that because it's made Johnson more necessary on the ice for them at the moment. The other aspect of that, though, is that this Sanheim Risto pairing so far seems to be working to a large degree. And we saw that in the Boston game, I think, to a large degree. So now I'm worried about when Cam York comes back, like, what are the coaches going to decide to do? So, like, what do you think?
Don't put Risto and Zamula together again. That's for one thing. I really do enjoy Cam York and Travis Sanheim together, but at the end of the day, when you're injured and you're out, I hate to say it, but if another pair is better than that, then you got to stick with it. Now, again, it's going to be one of those things like a wait and see, because personally, I'm thinking about, who would Cam play with? I mean, he played with Jamie for a little bit last season, but I like Jamie with Sealers. So I think it's one of those things where wait and see, but definitely not Igor and Igor and Ristolainen was an awful combination. It had potential, but can't do that.
Well, and sticking with the Zamula stuff, so I felt like for a long time this season, he needed to be off power play too to
Yep.
just help his game. And they were forcing him on there until they finally figured out, which they should have figured out sooner, about Neil Andre there. So my thing is, look, if they don't intend to play him, then just send him down. I mean, if somebody's going to take him, let him take him.
Yeah.
There's other guys in Lehigh. It's not like they're bereft of young defensemen who could possibly help this team, but it just looks like they don't even want to consider that. And that's the part that I'm not getting, because again, if you're supposed to be a rebuilding team, don't you want to occasionally put a young player in there to see what they can do?
100%. And I think that's the thing with the Flyers this season, that maybe fans need to understand that this team, despite the players saying we want to go to the playoffs, I mean, every player is going to say that. Like, that's a thing that, like, no player is going to say, oh, yeah, we don't want to be a playoff team.
Right.
But when it comes to this whole rebuild and all that, we all know, the reporters know, the media, the organization, they know this is not a playoff team. If it were a playoff team, things would be a lot different. So I don't get why they're so headstrong about keeping Zamula. I thought weeks ago maybe to send him down and to, bring up another young talent. I think that there is a lot of young guys in Lehigh that deserve an opportunity. Granted, I know we're only, a handful of games into this season. But again, if your main, and this is my problem, if you have a player that made the opening night roster who is not executing and not playing well, it's more beneficial for him, for Zamula in this case, to be sent down, gain confidence again, work whatever he needs to work on, and then bring up a young prospect that wants that opportunity and that can learn from it. Kind of like they did with Jet Luchenko. I mean, I wouldn't have kept Jet as long. However, you're giving that player experience that they can then go back and work on. So what's the point? Because you're going to burn out Zamula. And that's my fear of Zamula, is that he's going to be so in his head of, I can't do this. I lost all my confidence. And I spoke to him at training camp. We had a one-on-one, and he was so confident, Russ and Rachel, heading into the season.
Yeah.
And it sucks to see him deteriorate, because
I think the struggles on the power play took it away. And that's why I think he needs to get it back.
They should have. And
Right.
that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Take him off the power play, let him play 5-on-5 and be strong on that, and that doesn't take away your confidence, right? Because people get rotated in and out of power play units all the time, and
Right.
I don't think that would have felt awkward to him. It just would have felt like a natural course of action for the team. So yeah, and the fact that it took them so long to get Emil Andre into the lineup, I think was also indicative of this similar thing. But
And just to understand the name that I'm going to get at, it's not Ronnie Attard right now because he started off the season slow, but it's Helge Grans. Like he has NHL experience. Like, why wouldn't you at least see what you have in him?
And he had a good training camp, Grans, and that's the thing too. I mean, I don't know what this organization is doing. I know none of us really know what they're doing, but I'm confused because they're preaching about a rebuild, but yet they're not displaying that with who they're having on ice.
Yeah, I think,
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. And you can run your games all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I can get my money as quick in as 15 minutes. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick, easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up today to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineups. One thing that you can choose is Nathan McKinnon for more or less than half a goal and Evander Kane for more than 1.5 hits. You can also do Dave Pastrnak for more than 2.5 shots on goal, or how about Sidney Crosby for more than half a point? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game.
We've had a lot of criticisms here, but that's what you do when you're 10 games in. You kind of look at stuff, but it doesn't take away from the fantastic effort they had against Boston.
No, that was a great game.
It was a really great game, and looking forward, at least from our perspective, to the Flyers maybe trying to have some success against the Blues. So let's talk about the Blues, Haley.
Okay.
Now, I think one of the things, they're 5-5 now, right?
Yep.
At 10 games in, so both teams are 10 games in, but their last 2 games have gone extremely poorly, losing 7-1 to Ottawa and 5-2 to Montreal. Like, is this like a scoring problem? Is this a confidence problem? Like, what do you think has been happening?
I'll give you my opinion, and I'll give you what the locker room told me today. My opinion is that they focused too much time on that Toronto game. They put all their focus and energy into beating former coach Craig Berube, which they accomplished. But I could tell during that game they were playing a lot harder than they usually do play. So I feel like that's where their focus went. I actually asked Coach Bannister about that today because I was curious. I'm like, do you think that the players focused a little bit too much on that game? Of course, he's going to say no, but I had to ask because that's how I felt. What Jordan Kyrou told me today, he was actually very upset about what happened, and he just, began kind of like venting in a way. He just was like, this is not who we are. This is not, the team that came onto this road trip. We're better than this. And he said that everyone should be disappointed in how they played in the last 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at them and I'm trying to see, are they just a 500 team? Like, I know Binnington can sway that and change that, but as a team, not looking at Binnington, just saying, are they a 500 team in this league?
Yeah, and that's a great question because, with Maria and Broberg and Holloway, the offer sheet guys, and then you have Suter, who shouldn't even be playing on the first pair, but he is, and Foxa,
Right.
Texier. Like, you have all these guys that they brought in, and the offer sheet guys are killing it. I think Holloway is doing a great job. Philip Broberg, again, he had that point streak in the very beginning of the season. I know it's still the beginning. However, without Robert Thomas, there is a difference on the ice. And the guy, Braden Shen acknowledged that to me today. He even said it. Yeah, we do notice that there is a difference. Now, again, the Blues have the capability of being a playoff team. However, when you have losses and I'm not putting down the Senators, I know they do have some good players, but to teams like the Senators, to teams like the Canadiens, where they're just ugly losses, when you have to pull Joel Hofer, towards the end of the second frame, that to me says, hey, there might be a bigger problem because when I was predicting this road trip, it was a 4-game road trip. I knew the Maple Leafs were going to be a tough team. And I thought, you know what? Maybe they're going to have like a little bit of a difficult win against the Canadiens and an easy win against the Senators. Flyers, with how they were playing, I'm like, okay, they're going to beat the Flyers too. Now I'm like, there's a real possibility that they come out of this road trip with only one win.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think that's the issue, is that they had an awful loss in the Minnesota Wild, a 4-1 loss with a goalie goal for the Wild. And they almost defeated the Jets, which I have to give them credit for. But
Mm-hmm.
the point, I could go over all their scores and all that. The point is that they do have talent. But right now, looking at the West, and especially the Central, it is brutal. You have to really step it up, because there's teams with already 16 points. The Blues, I believe, have 10 points. You can't fall behind this early.
Yeah, it really seems like it's a combination of not having been able to adjust to some of the injuries that they've had and unforced errors. I mean, you especially look at like the last game with the like dozens of giveaways they had. Like, you can't win a game if you're just giving away the puck all the time.
It's
But
awful.
but they have had like the holes in the lineup, like Robert Thomas, like Torrey Krug isn't there. Nick Leddy. I don't know what his contribution could be to the team.
Nick Leddy's got so much mileage on him at this point.
Yeah,
you
Nick
know?
Leddy. Even Coach Bannister said today that he doesn't have a timeline, so I'm not
Right.
suspecting anything of Nick Leddy.
Right.
And Matthew Holloway, he wasn't practicing today due to some injury. Not Matthew Holloway. Oh my gosh. See, look at
Dylan
my brain.
Holloway.
No, it was Matthew Joseph.
Oh, Matthew.
I was
Oh,
thinking
yeah,
about,
yeah. The
I was thinking about
defenseman.
Holloway.
Yeah.
You can tell I have been busy today.
Yep.
But with the defense is an interesting point, though, Rachel. You did mention about Torrey Krug being out.
Mhm.
And I actually did ask Scott Perunovich today, who is a defenseman for the Blues that hasn't been utilized much. And, I have been the biggest advocate of putting Scott Perunovich in that power play. I think he actually mimics Torrey Krug's type of play. And I said to Scott,
Right.
I'm like, tell me about how you feel about people kind of comparing you to Torrey Krug on the power play. And he was like, I just want them to give me an opportunity. He has been healthy scratch majority of the season. And I feel badly for him, because I know that he is putting in that work. And I know that he is trying. But again, it's more beneficial to have a guy like Scott Perunovich and maybe rather than a Matthew Kessel, because at least Perunovich can provide some value on that power play. And just like the Flyers.
Yeah, Kessel's more of a puck mover. He's got a decent shot, but that's true.
Yeah, and even and it's funny because Kessel was scratched a couple of times, and Coach Bannister even said that he wasn't playing up to par, and he's been disappointed with how he's been this season.
I mean, all right, here's what I would say. You can't be disappointed in Matthew Kessel. He was a long shot to make the NHL. Like you know what I mean? Like I liked him. I put in reports on him for EP Ringside, and I said, yeah, I think he could play. But you can't be disappointed because he's a bottom pairing guy. That's all he's going to be, and he could be a decent fill-in. That's what he is. So I don't know what he's expecting. But with Perunovich, I feel like he's had to fight for his ice time his entire existence there. And I don't know why, only because, look, I get it. He's not the biggest guy, but like you said, neither is Krug. He's not the greatest defender, but he's pretty good. But he has offensive ability, and they need the offense. Like, that part puzzles me.
Haley, are you muted?
We don't hear you.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, just start over.
Okay.
I'll start the question over.
Okay.
Yeah, like Matthew Kessel, like I don't know how Coach Bannister, Drew Bannister could be upset with him because, like, I had him pegged in his draft year as, yeah, he could play in the NHL. He'd probably be, a fill-in, and now they're expecting him to do more than that, and I just feel like that's a bridge too far. But Scott Perunovich, I feel like ever since he's been up with them, and it's more than this year, and they've had different coaches, he's had to fight for his ice time, and I feel like why not give him a chance? He has offensive talent.
Yeah, and that's like the problem too, is that you look at this Blues defense and, I question a lot of things about it. Colton Parayko is a very strong player, so I can't question him. But then you have Ryan Suter, who is your first pair next to Parayko. You have P.O. Joseph. I mean, he was fine, but he's not great.
He's a fringe player at this point.
Right.
Philip Broberg. I mean, he's more of a two-way player, but they don't have a player that's specifically a power play type of player on defense. Scott Perunovich, you have that. I watched him a lot with the Thunderbirds last season.
Yeah.
And he was great on the power play when they did have him in. I don't know what exactly Drew Bannister is doing. I think that sometimes he plays it a little bit safe. again, I know that, it's easy for me to say that I don't speak to him every day. However, what I do, I listen to him every day. I see the games every, time they play in the practices, and they don't really switch up their pairings or lines that crazy
Yeah, I mean,
often.
back in his heyday, Justin Falk used to be that great power play guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to be mean about him, but again, he's not at
He's
that
not what he
point.
used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. One other follow-up here. So if they do have a center problem, I know a 6'1", 203 guy in Springfield that maybe they should look at in Dalibor Dvorsky. He's gotten off to a
I
good
wish.
start this season. He is used to playing against men, even though he's 19. Why not bring him up and see what he might be able to do for you?
It's been the most disappointing thing to see Dvorsky not make this team out of camp. Um, I thought he had a fine camp. I don't think it was bad. And the one thing that Doug Armstrong said, Blues GM, was that they wanted him to be able to play where he's going to always play as an NHLer. For instance, they don't want to have him on a fourth or third line because they see him as a second or first line type of player. So they don't want, it was a really weird explanation, but they didn't want him to be in that setting with the Blues if he wasn't going to be like a top six. I
Okay,
think
so
it's
here's an idea. I'm coach, right? Now they've hired me as the coach. I bring up Dvorsky. I make him the second line center. I'm putting Braden Shen on the wing, right wing, and I'm going to put Jake Neighbors down on the third line to fill in for Kapanen. Give it a shot. Braden Shen's right there to help him. If he needs to take faceoffs, he can take faceoffs. We can't hear you again. So you're just going to have to start your answer over again. I think it's your mic wire. Wait, now I think we hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, so just start your answer
Yeah,
over
to
again.
start. Sorry.
That's right.
Okay. While they did try that with Captain Braden Shen with putting him on a wing position, they eventually moved him back into that center position 2 games later. I think that as much as they want to try out some of these new things with these players, they just go back to their old ways. I did speak to Shen today too about, him being moved all around the lineup. I said, he started off as a left winger on the third pair and then the third line, and then you get moved to the first line center. Now you're the second line center. I'm like, what is going on? Tell me. And he smiled and laughed and said, every day is a new day here. So I think that even he's like a little bit like, what is going on? The message heading into the season, though, from Doug Armstrong and Coach Bannister was that Braden Shen would be on a wing position.
Right.
And it was going to be Boosh that was going to be the second line center. That's what the whole plan was. And obviously Thomas is the first line center. Well, things change. I don't understand. And this is where I am confused with them not utilizing Dvorsky. Your first line center, as in Robert Thomas, is out. So instead of maybe, moving up Boosh to the first line and see how that goes, maybe bring in Dvorsky for the second line or even switch him, a Foxa for the third. There's whole kinds of combinations.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is their solution was, hey, let's take Braden Shen and just put him back into that center position, but not the second line this time, the first line. And that's where they had him for a lot of these games.
I mean, Dylan Holloway could play second line center. You could put
Yeah.
Braden Shen on first line center. You could put Dvorsky on third line center if you want to just do that without moving around the other pieces. But with Kapanen out, it just seems like a natural thing to try something.
It doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's the thing about this team that just is so mind-boggling is that you as somebody, and again, I know you follow your hockey, so I'm just saying from somebody that's not maybe following the Blues every day, can even say, hey, they should try this.
Right.
And meanwhile, every day I am on this podcast, like so annoyed about the lack of change and moves that they should be making. I mean, they move Kyrou all around all the time. They're just moving players, and they're healthy scratching Nathan Walker, who I do like, but I get that's like a smart. I mean, I like Nathan Walker, but I get why they're doing that.
Yeah, he's good in spurts. That's it.
Exactly. They utilize him when they can. He plays great, awesome. However, I just don't get what they're doing sometimes, and it is a very confusing situation with Dvorsky, who and again, I battle with this with Blues fans all the time. We go back and forth. I said, I would understand if he didn't make it out of camp because he needs that time to develop. However, Dvorsky said himself, his goal, his dream was to make the St. Louis Blues roster out of camp. When he did not make it, I said, I feel badly for him because this was a goal that he had.
Right.
And then people argued and said, oh, well, he's not ready yet. Okay, well, there's a lot of players on the Blues that would be getting outplayed by Dvorsky if he were to be called up.
Yeah, I feel that way.
It's so, I guess with the Flyers too, it's a relatable thing.
Yeah, but the Blues aren't in a rebuild. They may never be. They may never be in a rebuild as long as Doug Armstrong's there. They may have
2
to
more
wait.
years.
I know.
2 more, and then Alexander Steen comes in.
He's going to probably end up being the rebuild guy.
He will, 100%. Well, a lot of these contracts too, they end when Steen takes over. Jake Neighbors' new extension ends when Steen takes over. Holloway, Broberg. I want to say maybe Binner too.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot end when Steen takes over, which is actually a good thing that Doug did that because at least unlike as we all know, when a new GM takes over and there's these outrageous contracts that you can't get rid of,
he gave him a way out.
Situation. Yeah. So I respect that. But I don't think Doug wants to admit that they need a rebuild. I think that they did a mini one over the summertime, to be honest with you. But
with the offer sheets, but
no, it wasn't anything because I like Philip Broberg when he's on his offensive side of things.
Yeah, he's not a good defender. I don't like his defense. I think Holloway has a good upside, but it's not like he was going to be an instant impact. He had a nice end to the season last year, but he has to build on that.
Yeah, and that's fine. And Holloway's doing fine for what it is. I don't think he's a top 6 player. I think he
probably isn't.
Probably like a top 9. Put him on that third line, which is fine, which is where he's at. But they had him on the first line at one point too, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, they're gonna burn these kids out.
Well, we have a matchup to talk about and which team might come out on top and what those factors are. So, Haley, I think, what do you think is the strongest aspect of the Blues team right now that makes you think, yes, they can win this game?
It's something similar to the Flyers. It's that third period. I think that the Blues, they turn on their energy towards the final frame and they're able to actually execute. They take good shots on goal. So for me, that would be the number one thing with the Blues.
Yeah, I think what the Blues are going to do is try and do what the Bruins did, use their bigger defenders, hammer guys like Mitchkov and stuff, and try and win that physical battle. And then I think with the Flyers, try and get on the power play. The Blues penalty kill sucks. So it actually could help their power play. At the end, this game should be a tie. I call for a tie. Maybe the power will go out. Maybe something will do something.
Oh, hey, last night in Ottawa, the power went out and the game
didn't end. That's why I said that.
And that did not end up well for the Blues.
No.
I thought it was bad luck for Ottawa. I'm like, oh, power's out. This is a sign. No,
it helped them. I think this one the Flyers could win maybe 3-2, but it could go either way.
Yeah, I think, whether or not the Flyers can score 3 goals. And I know we say that, frequently because 3 goals is the benchmark in a lot of cases. Yeah. But I do think that in this particular game, to your point, Russ, the Blues are going to try to be physical and, outmuscle the Flyers. But if the Flyers can just get a little bit higher shot accuracy here and pot a couple goals, Haley, who do you think will be in net for this game? Do you know based on practice?
So practice today, they had both Joel Hofer and Jordan Binnington in net. I spoke to Hofer today, and he sounded in good spirits, honestly, despite what happened yesterday.
Right.
It's weird because they come back home and they take on the Maple Leafs on Saturday.
So they're gonna probably put Binnington against the Leafs, I bet.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if they put Hofer back in. I mean,
yeah,
but this is a different Joel Hofer than I saw last season. This Joel Hofer was so confident. And, he even said, he's like, losses like that happen. Like, he was just so focused on, I guess tomorrow, if he is in net.
Goalies with short memories are good goalies.
Yeah. And I like that. I'm happy to see that, for any player in any team, when you have a loss like that and you have to get pulled in that situation, I'm always happy to see when they can just focus on the next game. But I would suspect that Hofer would get the start. However, you know, I wouldn't be surprised too if they just give it to Binner so that way he gains a little bit more confidence in net before heading back against.
Yeah, there is a day off in between. So
yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that'll be a factor for the Flyers in terms of, who they're up against. I think Binnington somehow manages to stone the Flyers for no good reason. Every time it feels like that way. But yeah, I just think like the Flyers have to put together a stronger offensive push than they did against the Bruins.
Yeah.
And kind of break through that wall to be able to get those additional shot attempts. I really think that's just what was missing against Boston and why the score was so low is they just couldn't get set up offensively. So if they can do that against St. Louis, which I think is a little easier for them to do, that might put them over the top.
And the Blues, they struggle with that too. I mean, I compare these two teams because they're so similar all the time. They just keep on passing the puck. They can't find any slot to shoot the puck, so then they pass the puck again. And it's essentially, and I know that these are two different teams with two different players and obviously things like that. But when I look at both of these teams' power plays, they seem similar. When I look at both of these teams in a sense of how they, set up, shots, similar. It's very similar and frustrating.
The only difference is though, Braden Shen will set up in the crease on the power play where almost nobody on the Flyers will.
Oh, and that's the benefit. And that's why, the Blues are a better team. They're a better team, even though they're similar. I think that again, and I hate it because it's so infuriating watching both of these teams play sometimes. But I think that they just need to take more chances and shoot the puck. Just take the slap shot, take the wrister, backhand it in, anything rather than passing it back and forth for 30 seconds while you have your fans yelling shoot, because that happens at Enterprise. Everyone just yells shoot all the time. And it's because the Blues, when they have a minute left on the clock against the Winnipeg Jets and they're down 1 goal, instead of taking shots on goal, they are passing it and then the clock expires. I am clearly upset about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, I guess, definitely stuck. All right. Well, we'll see how it goes in the actual game. But Haley, thank you so much for joining. Always a pleasure
Thank
Yep,
you.
to talk Flyers and Blues.